Far away from Earth, in a galaxy full of ancient planets and powerful species, something big was happening. The Intergalactic Concord, a peaceful union of hundreds of alien civilizations, had finally decided to open its doors to a new world Earth. Most aliens didn't think much of humans. They were new, simple, and emotional creatures. Some even laughed at the idea of letting Earth join such an advanced alliance. But the rules were clear. Every new species had to pass a test of traditional challenge, chosen by the elders of the Concord. This time, the challenge would be hosted on the shining crystal planet of Valdrisa, home to the strongest warriors in the galaxy. And leading them was Princess Zalara, a tall, proud alien with glowing eyes and silver armor. She was famous across the stars not for her beauty, but for never losing a single challenge. She stood in the center of a giant, floating arena shaped like a flower, its petals made of light. Thousands of beings watched from around the galaxy. The human ship arrived late. From it stepped not a soldier or a super genius, but a quiet man in simple clothes. His name was Dr. Theo Quinn, a linguist and emotional researcher. He was not tall. He had no weapons. He looked more like a teacher than a champion. A wave of confused murmurs filled the arena. Was this really Earth's best? Zalara stepped forward, her voice strong and sharp. "You can't last a minute against me, human." Theo looked up, calm and thoughtful. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to represent humanity." Zalara raised an eyebrow. "Then you've already lost." The judges announced the test, the trial of minds. It was not a physical fight, but something deeper. Both challengers would enter a psychic space, filled with puzzles, illusions, and emotional trials. It was designed to break the mind and reveal the soul. Theo nodded, accept. The crowd was silent as the two entered the glowing chamber. Their bodies stayed still, but their minds were sent into the trial. Theo found himself in a strange place, a mix of memories and dreams. He saw scenes from his past, his childhood in a small house, his mother reading him stories, the feeling of being left out in school. The trial was using his own feelings against him. But Theo didn't panic. Instead, he sat down and began to reflect. He smiled softly at the memory of his mother. He forgave the kids who once laughed at him. He felt the pain, but he didn't run from it. Outside the chamber, the judges watched in surprise. Most beings tried to fight or escape the trials. But this human, he was doing something different. He was understanding inside. Theo walked through a corridor of mirrors, showing him moments of weakness, his failures, fears, regrets. But he kept walking, whispering to himself, "I am more than my worst moments." At the same time, Princess Zalara was racing through the trials with skill and speed. She knew how to destroy illusions, how to block emotions, how to stay in control. She was perfect. But then, she noticed something strange in one mirror. She saw not her own memory, but Theo's, a small boy, alone on a playground. She frowned. Why was the trial showing her his pain? She stepped closer and saw something that shook her. The boy wasn't giving up. He stood up, wiped his tears, and helped another child who had fallen. Why help others when you were hurting yourself? Thought back in the arena, time ticked on. Theo had passed the first phase. He hadn't fought. He hadn't run. Had simply faced everything with quiet strength. The crowd didn't know what to think. This human, he was still standing in Princess Zalara. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel in control. The glowing chamber hummed with soft light as the next phase of the trial of minds began. Both Theo Quinn and Princess Zalara remained still in their seats, but their minds had already entered a deeper level of the psychic test. This time, the trial would not just show memories, it would create illusions so real that even the strongest minds could forget what was real and what wasn't. Thought. Theo opened his eyes and found himself standing in a quiet, rainy street. It looked like a small town from Earth. Children played under umbrellas, and an old woman offered him a cup of tea from a tiny shop. Everything felt warm and peaceful, but Theo knew it wasn't real. He sat down on a bench and watched the people. Slowly, their faces began to change. One child looked like his sister who had passed away. The woman at the shop now had the voice of his late grandmother. The street began to blur with memories from his own life, moments of happiness, but also moments of deep pain. The trial was tempting him. It was offering comfort, but only if he let go of the truth. Theo closed his eyes. He felt the rain. He remembered those he had lost, but he didn't try to escape the pain. He whispered softly to himself, "Pain is part of love. I won't forget them. I won't forget who I am." And with that, the illusion broke. Meanwhile, Zalera was in a completely different illusion. She stood at the top of a mountain, facing hundreds of warriors cheering her name. Her father, the great king of Valdrisa, stood beside her, proud and smiling. But something felt wrong. Her father never smiled like that. He had always been cold, strict, and demanding. The warriors were praising her to Isley. The sky was too perfect. Zalera narrowed her eyes. "This is not real," she said. The illusion shifted, revealing a cold, gray hall. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Weakness is failure. Emotion is a crack in the armor." She stood, still, silent. The memory of her childhood rushed back, years of training, endless tests, always being told to be stronger, harder, colder. But then she remembered Theo, the way he had smiled at his painful memories, the way he didn't hide, his sadness. For a brief second, she wondered, was his way also a kind of strength? The trial changed again. Now both Theo and Zalera were in the same space, face to face. They stood in a room filled with floating lights, each one showing a different memory. Some were his, some were hers. Zalera stepped forward. "Why do you not hide your pain, human?" she asked. Theo looked around, then answered gently, "Because pain teaches us. It reminds us what matters. I don't run from it. I learned from it." She studied him carefully. There was no fear in his eyes. "Only quiet courage and love?" she asked. "What use is love in a galaxy built on power?" Theo looked at one of the floating lights, a memory of his sister hugging him on a stormy night. "Love is power," he said. "Not the kind that controls others. It's a kind that helps us rise when we've fallen." Zalera turned away, confused. No one had ever spoken to her like this. She had faced champions, warriors, and genius minds. But none of them had made her question herself like this quiet human. The lights around them flickered. A soft bell rang in the distance. The second phase was over. Both challengers had made it through. But the judges whispered among themselves. Something was different this time. Theo had not just survived. He had changed the shape of the trial itself. And Zalera. The undefeated warrior was no longer sure who she was really fighting. The third phase of the trial of minds began silently. There was no announcement, no flashing lights, no warning. The chamber simply shifted around Theo and Zalera, pulling them deeper into its core. This part of the trial was called the echo phase, where memories were not just shown, but shared. The trial would take pieces from one mind and show them to the other, without control, without filters. Theo opened his eyes and found himself in a large, golden hall. The walls were covered in sharp metal designs. There were no windows. The air felt cold. It wasn't Earth. He looked around and realized this was not his memory. A small girl stood in the middle of the hall, trying to lift a heavy training sword. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were full of fear. A tall man, her father, a king, stood in front of her, arms crossed, expression hard. "You are the daughter of warriors," the king said. "You will not cry." The girl tried again. The sword fell with a loud crash. She flinched, but still no tears came. Theo's heart ached. He had never met this girl, but he somehow knew this was Zalera many years ago. Suddenly, Theo felt something new. Her pain, her pressure, her deep loneliness. She had grown up in a world where feelings were seen as weakness, where love was earned through strength alone. She had been trained to never show fear, never trust softness, and now she was facing a human who lived by the very thing she had been taught to hide. Theo walked closer to the memory. He couldn't change it, but he whispered softly, as if the little girl could hear him. It's okay to feel. You were strong even when you were afraid. The memory faded slowly now. It was Zalara's turn. She stood in a small living room with bookshelves, soft couches, and pictures of smiling people. A little boy sat on the floor, building something with toy blocks. His mother sat nearby, reading a book. It was warm, it was peaceful. But then a knock came at the door. The woman stood up quickly. Her face changed from soft to worried. She whispered something to the boy and walked out. Minutes passed. The boy stared at the door, waiting, but she didn't come back. Zalara could feel it, the sadness, the silence, the ache of being left behind. She didn't understand everything, but the feeling was strong. This is his pain, she thought. But why doesn't he hide it? The memory shifted to later that night. The same Boynell, older, stood at the same door, watching. The rain. A man walked up behind him, gently placed a hand on his shoulder. She's not coming home tonight, the man said softly. But you're not alone. Zalara stepped back, shaken. Right. This was Theo's life, not a test. Not an illusion. A real memory. A real wound. Yet, Theo still smiled. He still spoke with warmth and kindness. He didn't use his pain as a weapon. He didn't wear it as a shield. He carries it like a story, she thought. It's like something to share, not something to hide. The chamber lights pulsed gently, and both of them were pulled back into the present. They sat across from each other. Silent. For a moment neither spoke. Then Theo looked at her and said, "We are more alike than you think." Zalara didn't answer. But something in her had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about winning the trial. She was thinking about understanding this human. The third phase was over. The audience outside had no idea what just happened inside the chamber, but the judges noticed something. The energy between the two challengers had changed. This was no longer just a test. This was becoming a connection. The fourth phase of the trial was called the Maze of Emotion. This part was designed not to test skill or memory, but to challenge the heart. It twisted feelings, created doubts, and made the mind question everything it believed. As the light changed in the chamber, both Theo and Zalara found themselves in a new space, a place that looked like a quiet desert at sunset. The sky was orange and pink. The ground stretched forever. In the distance were shape stores, mirrors, and small paths leading in every direction. But the strangest part, they were now together inside the same illusion. They could see and hear each other fully. Zalara looked around, her eyes scanning for danger. "What is this place?" she asked. Theo looked at the soft sky and said calmly, "It's not a place, it's a feeling." She turned to him. "You speak as if you understand everything. You not afraid?" Theo shook his head. "I've felt fear many times, but fear doesn't control me. I listen to it and let it pass." Zalara frowned. "On my world, we are taught to silence fear, to crush it." Theo looked at her gently. "And has that ever truly worked?" She didn't answer. They began walking through the maze together. The path shifted with their thoughts. Every time they felt doubt, the path grew longer. Every time they remembered something meaningful. A new door opened. At one point, they came to a mirror. It showed Zalara not in armor, but as the little girl from her memory, tired, lonely, and hiding tears behind her eyes. She stepped back quickly. "I don't want to see this." Theo stood beside her. "Why not?" "'Cause it makes me feel weak." "Feeling something doesn't make you weak," he said. "It makes you real." She stared at the mirror, then at Theo. "You believe too much in emotions." He smiled. Maybe I believe in what connects us. Feelings, memories, kindness, those are stronger than any weapon." As they moved forward, the maze began to change. Instead of challenges, it started offering reflections of their thoughts. Theo saw memories of Earth children learning to read, families rebuilding after storms, people holding hands even in hard times. Zalara saw something even stranger. She saw herself, years from now, standing beside other species, not as a warrior but as a guide, a protector who leads with heart, not fear. Could this be me? She wondered. They reached the center of the maze. There stood a final door. On the door was a question. Written in glowing letters, "Do you believe the other is your enemy?" They looked at each other. Zalara was the first to speak. "I came here to prove that humans were weak. But I see now that your strength is something I don't understand yet. You do not fight to win, you fight to connect." Theo nodded. "I don't see you as my enemy. I see you as someone searching for the same thing," meaning Zalara hesitated, then reached out. Together they touched the door. It opened. Light flooded the space. And just like that, the trial ended. Back in the real world, the audience gasped as the chamber lights faded. Theo and Zalara opened their eyes slowly. But something was different now. Zalara did not stand proudly like before. She stood quietly, thoughtfully, her eyes softer than anyone had ever seen. Theo bowed slightly in respect. She bowed back. The judges looked at each other. The fourth phase was not just past, it had been transformed. Trial was no longer about winning or losing, it was about understanding, and the tides had truly begun to shift. The fifth phase of the trial was known as the mirror trial, the most difficult and rarest challenge in the history of the Concord. Few ever reached it, even fewer passed. This phase was not about fear, strength, or endurance. It was about truth. Mirror trial allowed both challengers to fully enter each other's minds, to live not just memories, but emotions, thoughts, and choices. It was the ultimate test of understanding another being's soul. As the trial began, both Theo and Zalara sat quietly in the center of the crystal chamber. The energy around them shimmered like water. A soft wind blew, though there was no air. A voice echoed inside their minds. "What you see now is not what was. It is what could have been. Are you ready?" Theo breathed deeply. "Yes." Zalara paused, then nodded. "Begin." In the blink of an eye, they switched lives. Zalara, inside Theo's Minjazlara, found herself in a small Earth classroom. She was no longer a warrior princess. She was a young boy, sitting quietly in the back, watching other children laugh and talk. No one spoke to her. She felt invisible. At lunch, she sat alone. A teacher walked over, offering a kind smile, and asked if she was okay. Zalaran sighed. Theo's memory felt her throat tighten. The kindness hurt more than the silence. Then the memory shifted. She was now Theo. Older, sitting beside his father in a hospital. His mother lay in the bed, pale and silent. Zalara felt the pain crush her chest. She had fought beasts, survived storms, passed 100 tests. But this quiet sadness was different. It was slow, heavy, deep, and through it all, Theo never shouted, never gave up, just kept loving, even when it hurt. She whispered inside the memory, "How did you stay kind?" Theo inside Zalara's mind. Theo now stood on a vast training ground. The sun was bright, the air dry. He was Alariung, full of energy, but not allowed to rest. Every mistake was punished. Every emotion was corrected. He ran through obstacle courses, lifted weapons twice his size, stood alone in icy waters while her father watched with sharp eyes. There was no warmth, no praise, only rules, only orders. But the deepest part came later. Theo inside her memory stood at her coronation. She wore armor that shone like fire. The people cheered, but her heart was silent. No one hugged her.
I'll wait.
Number 1 said they were proud. What good is victory, Theo thought, if no one celebrates with you? He finally understood the weight Zalara carried, not just of tradition, but of being alone at the top. Back in the chamber, they returned to the present. At the same time, gasping softly, the chamber was quiet. So quiet, they looked at each other. Neither spoke, but they knew. Zalara stepped forward. Her voice was not strong or proud. It was soft, real. I thought strength was about silence, control, and winning, but now I see. More strength, Theo smiled a little sadly. I've seen what it means to carry a crown, to stand tall when no one sees your pain. For a long moment, they simply stood there, side by side. The mirror trial had done what no weapon could do. It had made them see each other not as enemies, not as rivals, but as equals with different battles. The judges, watching from above, were silent. Oh, no score was given. No point was marked. Because some moments are too big for numbers, this phase had no winner, only understanding. And for the first time, the galaxy watched a human and a warrior. Princess walk away from a challenge together. The final lights of the chamber faded. Soft bell rang across the arena, signaling the end of the trial of minds. The audience from all over the galaxy had been watching closely, expecting a winner, a loser, and a grand announcement. But what they saw left them completely silent. Theo and Princess Zalara stepped out of the glowing chamber not as two people on opposite sides, but walking side by side, quiet and calm. The judges, sitting high above in silver seats, waited to speak. But before they could say a word, Zalara turned to them. She raised one hand not as a warrior, but as someone who had something new to say. I request permission to speak before the results are given. The chief judge nodded slowly. Granted. Zalara turned to face the crowd and the cameras that sent the trial to every corner of the Concord. Her voice was clear, but softer than anyone had ever heard it. I came into this trial ready to defeat a human. I believed victory would prove my strength, but I was wrong. Gasps echoed through the arena. What this human showed me, she continued, is that true strength is not in how hard you strike, but how deeply you feel, how bravely you forgive, and how openly you understand. She turned to Theo. You did not break the rules. You changed the meaning of the challenge itself. You walked through pain and memory with kindness instead of pride. You did not fight to win, you connected. Theo, surprised, lowered his eyes humbly. He wasn't used to such attention. The chief judge stood. What do you say, human? Do you accept this honor? Theo looked at the crowd, then back at Zalara. I never came to win, came to listen, came to show that humans may not be the strongest or fastest, but we feel deeply, and we never stop trying, even when it hurts. The judge raised both arms. Then let the Concord record this trial not as a battle, but as a moment of unity. The audience stood. For the first time in years, a trial ended with no declared winner, because both sides had gained something greater than victory. Zalara smiled gently and whispered to Theo, You lasted more than a minute, human. Theo chuckled. I had a good teacher. Later, as the stars glittered above the Valdrazen Palace, Zalara and Theo stood together in the garden. They spoke not of the trial, but of their worlds. Theo told her about books, music, and how humans dance at weddings, even when they're terrible dancers. Zalara told him about her people's songs that are sung with colors, not words. Do you think our people can understand each other? Zalara asked. We already have, Theo replied. If we can, others will too. That night, the news spread like fire through the galaxy. Earth had passed the trial, but not through power, not through technology, not through battle, through empathy, through heart, through one human who walked into the unknown with nothing but understanding, and helped a warrior princess remember what it meant to feel. From that day on, no one ever again laughed when the name human was spoken. They remembered the trial not as a contest, but as a silent victory that changed everything. Weeks had passed since the trial of minds ended, but its effects were still spreading across the galaxy. The name Theo Quinn, once unknown, was now spoken in high places, quiet homes and distant planets. But it wasn't fame he cared about. Mattered to him was that the galaxy had seen a different kind of strength than humankind, back on Earth. People gathered to welcome him. He was offered awards, interviews, and medals, but Theo didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a bridge, someone who had simply listened and opened a door between two very different worlds. Far away on Valdrisa, Princess Zalara was not the same woman who had once said, You can't last a minute against me, human. She now wore no armor when she walked through her palace. Her voice had changed, less sharp, more thoughtful. Her people had noticed. Some were confused. Others were curious. Zalara began speaking about what she had learned about connection, emotion, and seeing others not as threats, but as stories waiting to be heard. She created a new council not just for warriors, but for artists, teachers, and peace builders. For the first time in her planet's history, feelings were not locked away in silence. They were welcomed. Then one day, she sent a message to Earth. Theo Quinn, would you return to Valdrisa? I have an idea I cannot build alone. Theo, sitting in a quiet garden on Earth, read the message and smiled. He replied with only one word: always. They met again beneath the crystal towers of the Concord. This time, not as rivals, but as friends. Together, they launched a program called the Empathy Exchange, a galaxy-wide effort where species could share their stories, cultures, and hearts. It wasn't easy. Many still believed in strength through control. Some didn't trust softness. Others thought kindness was weakness. But slowly the galaxy began to shift. One by one, planets opened their minds. A warrior from a desert world learned to sing a human lullaby. A scientist from a moon city wrote poems after reading Earth's love letters. A child from a distant star painted her dreams after hearing about rain for the first time. The bond between Earth and Valdrisa grew stronger. Not because of shared weapons or trade deals, but because of the people, humans, and aliens learning to feel together. One evening, Theo stood with Zalara on a quiet balcony, looking at the stars. Do you ever miss the way things were? She asked. Theo thought for a moment. I miss people who are gone. I miss days that won't return. But I don't miss hiding how I feel. She nodded slowly. Neither do I. There was silence between them, but it was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. It was peaceful. Then Zalara smiled. You know, you lasted much longer than a minute. Theo laughed. So did you. They both looked up at the stars, not as points of light, but as possibilities. Each one held a voice. Each one held a story. And maybe, just maybe, every story deserved to be heard from that day on. Across the stars, a new phrase began to spread. If you want to understand the galaxy, speak to a human. Ember remembered the day. Quiet man from Earth and a powerful warrior princess stood together not to fight, but to listen. It was the moment when the galaxy learned something that would never be forgotten. Humanity's greatest strength is its heart.